Hi guys, Ping Yao here, and welcome to episode 2.1 of Santa Capricia. So, I'm doing a slightly different episode today, just because I want to show a little bit more context and in terms of my thoughts on how the city is going to develop and grow. So I want to give you a little bit of a tour and also show you some inspiration for different neighbourhoods and areas, because Santa Capricia is very much going to be about the different locations. It will be obviously a city, but within it will be lots of different types of areas. So there'll be wealthy neighbourhoods, there'll be sort of beach resorts, there'll obviously be industrial areas such as this, as well as more sort of rural neighbourhoods. So there's going to be quite a lot of different types of neighbourhoods, I guess, in the city. As you can see, we just zoom out, this is the build as it is so far. In fact, it's a little bit out of date because this save game was previous to my current one, which, as you'll know in the last episode, I've built a railway station over in this neck of the woods. So it is a bit out of date, but it still nevertheless gives you a feel for where we are at the moment. So let's just have a little explore, and I'm going to go fly down to the south of this area, and this area is known as North Kennett, and it's a kind of suburban industrial area to the north of the main sort of part of town. As we move to the south, this area now known as Chester will become the sort of main harbour and port for Santa Capricia. So it's actually a pretty big area looking at this as I fly due south. So there's going to be a lot of heavy industry here. There'll be container ports. I want to build an oil refinery and maybe a steelworks and various other things. So I've been quite inspired by San Diego, the harbour there, which has a big naval base, which is something else I want to maybe eventually look at doing. But also some of the other American cities, particularly sort of Long Beach in LA, and also areas of Houston, which have got big oil refineries and things like that. So that is the area of Chester, also known as Santa Capricia Port. On the other side of the water here, which is at the moment known as the Channel, I want to have a couple of bridges spanning the river, and they will connect the main sort of downtown area of Santa Capricia. And this area will be very much in the vein of San Francisco. It'll have that type of vibe to it. And I want the main bulk of downtown to be on this peninsula here that you can see. Because I think that will be quite a good location for all the skyscrapers and offices and museums and tourist attractions, things like that. So as we fly we fly west, we're going to get to the western limit of the island, and this area here, I want this to become the original part of the city, I suppose, where it was first settled. And I imagine that it would have been settled by the Spanish in the colonial era, sort of colonial times. They would have built a colony here, a little settlement, maybe a citadel they built on the headland, which would have been a really good defensive position up there on the top there. So I might terraform that a little bit, maybe make a citadel on the top. So now we find ourselves on the southern coast of the island, which is really all about the beach here. We've got a big, very long beach, which will be inspired, I think, by Miami Beach in particular. Also Santa Monica around there. I want to have some hotels, casinos, big resorts, maybe a pier, certainly a long beach, and possibly a little theme park maybe. I'm not talking Disneyland, but certainly something there would be quite fun to do. And then beyond the beach you have the main centre of the island, which will be where Warner is, which is quite a wealthy area, quite a wealthy suburb, because it's opposite downtown, it's close to the beach, and it's away from the harbour there, away from the industry. So I think this area would be quite a nice place to live if you're a Santa Caprician. As we move back north, we're going to cross over the second largest island in Santa Capricia, and this area here is now is known as Inocia, which I imagine would have been a Native American name, which maybe just stuck, so they've kind of kept the name. And I don't know exactly what Inocia is going to be like at the moment. It might be a combination of kind of residential and commercial and industrial, but anyway, it's probably again, it's probably quite a nice place to live, I guess, surrounded by water there on the island. And there'll be some bridges and connections linking back across to the main island of Santa Capricia, and also out to the east there, which is what's known as Cramps Beach, and that again will be predominantly hotels, things like that. As you move further to the east, so Santa Capricia itself will, the suburbs eventually will give way to just wild land, really. So there'll be maybe some nature reserves, things like that. It'll be quite nice to do a little sort of zoo or something, maybe. So it will have much more of a wild feel to it over here, all these islands and peninsulas and things. Whereas this area, this area here is known as Grimes Bay, and Grimes Bay I want to be a little bit like the suburbs of Sydney on the coast there, where you have all these posh mansions and houses hugging the shore. I want that sort of vibe, and I always imagine that maybe this part of Santa Capricia will be the real sort of wealthy millionaires will live around Grimes Bay here. Be the place to live if you can afford it. And then on the this big flat plain, which is completely, it's hard to grasp just what I'm going to be doing here, because it's just empty, obviously. I mean, there's nothing there at the moment. But eventually this big area here will be where most of the people in the city will live, and it extends way up there to the north. And eventually I think that area to the north will become maybe where the airport is, because it seems like a good position. But this area here, known as New Meadows, will be the sort of main suburban part of Santa Capricia, and I think it'll be sort of a grid, a bit like LA, with blocks, houses, shopping malls, things like that. So as we move back towards the river, let's get myself orientated here. This part of the city is known as Postilion, which will be the second kind of, well, it's almost like a second city, I guess, like a second downtown. And I want this to be more of a modern downtown. I want Santa Capricia downtown itself to be older, maybe to be sort of early 20th century, whereas Postilion I want to be more of a sort of 1970s, 80s kind of vibe to it. So there'll be lots of sort of glass boxes. It'll be sort of medium-sized skyline, nothing too dramatic, but nevertheless it'll be very much its own sort of city, like a twin city almost, but still within the confines of Greater Santa Capricia itself. So let's just spin ourselves around, and what we're looking at here are the Santa Caprician Hills. I think these will be, well, there's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? Should we come up with a name for these hills? I don't know what they are at the moment, but they form a kind of natural break between the, let's stop moving a sec, between the south, where the main city is, and to the more rural neighbourhoods to the north. And they're a natural barrier, and I think that's quite interesting, because I want to pretty much stop the city here at the foot of these hills. But then on the other side of the hills, I want them to look more like kind of like rural, very much a rural neighbourhood. So lots of small towns and villages. That area there is known as Somerset Valley, and I always imagine that to be actually quite a wealthy place. Maybe there's lots of sort of horse farms and sort of cornfields, things like that. But it's not really a sort of working class vibe. I want it to be quite a wealthy vibe actually over there. So it'll be a nice place to live. It's out of the smog of the city, because I think this area is going to get particularly smoggy with all the industry there. So I think Somerset Valley is where I would like to live if I was a Santa Caprician. Now another area I want to talk to, you can really see those hills well there, and you can see that does form a natural barrier, which I think is quite interesting. This area here, which is the furthest point to the west of the map, is known as Gosking, and Gosking I want to have a kind of a Californian coastal vibe, more of a small town vibe. So maybe Gosking is quite a historical town. I'm thinking of having a fishing port there, possibly. That might be quite nice to do. But again, a much smaller scale town, Gosking. So let's just cross over into Somerset Valley, because there's one other area I want to talk about, and that is the area, as I've gradually moved my way along the valley here, which is between Somerset Valley below us and the area of Highbrook, which is way off in the distance there, which is probably where I'm going to have the airport, as I mentioned earlier. Now the area in between is known as Saracoa on the map, and I think Saracoa could be really one of the most interesting parts of the city. I want to try and build a lake somewhere in the middle there, and maybe have a little dam or something, because that would make sense if there was a lake there to have a dam. And then Saracoa itself, I want to be a lakeside town, so it's still a suburb of Santa Capricia, but again having its very much having its own vibe. And I think a nice lakeside town of a sort of promenade. I mean, you know, this is hard to visualize, but that's kind of what I'm thinking of doing here. And there'll be some connections through the hills here back to the city, because otherwise it's a little bit cut off. But I mean, I haven't really thought about how the road arteries and the networks will work yet. All I know is where I want to build those areas, and that seems like a sensible sort of setup, I think. So there you go. I mean, hopefully that gives you a feel for what I'm trying to achieve. There's a lot here, and there's a lot of different areas, but actually those different areas I think is what could keep Santa Capricia interesting, I suppose. If it's just one vibe, then I'm going to get bored with it. But if there's lots of different areas with different feels, different neighbourhoods, it'll make the city not only more interesting to look at, but also more interesting to build. And believe me, that's something that I have to consider, because in the past I've often got to about this size and I've given up. So if I can make something that looks a bit more bigger, looks a bit more finished, then that's fantastic. Let's just finish off where we started, back at this lovely view here, back at this lovely old mattress, my bed for the night. And until next episode, I'm going to leave you with this view. I'm not even going to do you any nice cinematics, because to be honest, I can't be bothered. And I look forward to episode 3, when we're going to be getting back into the build. I'm not sure what we're going to be doing in the next episode. I think I might be extending further to the south, maybe start work on the bigger industrial area which will become part of the port. So until then, I bid you farewell, and don't forget to subscribe, guys. Cheers.